Mastering cultural competence. Cultural competence is only as good as the numbers that prove it. Which key performance indicators, KPIs, will its cultural competence team use to measure the success of its cultural competence initiative within their organization? The quest for cultural competence, operational excellence. It's a behemoth of a challenge, one that requires a deep dive into the very fabric of an organization. I've spent decades studying and working with companies that aspire to achieve this lofty goal, and I'm here to tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. Let me take you back to my time working with a large multinational corporation. They had all the right intentions to create a more inclusive workplace, to better serve their diverse customer base, and to stay ahead of the competition. But, as they soon discovered, good intentions weren't enough. The company's leadership team realized that their cultural competence initiative needed to be more than just a checkbox on a diversity and inclusion report. They needed to quantify their progress, to measure the impact of their efforts, and to adjust course accordingly. That's when I was brought in to help them develop a set of metrics that would give them a clear picture of their cultural competence. It wasn't an easy task, let me tell you. We're talking about trying to measure the immeasurable, the intangible aspects of an organization's culture. I started by immersing myself in the company's day-to-day operations. I attended meetings, sat in on training sessions, and interviewed employees from all levels of the organization. I wanted to get a sense of the company's DNA, to understand what made them tick. What I discovered was a common theme, a sense of ambiguity. Employees weren't sure what was expected of them, or how their individual actions contributed to the company's overall cultural competence. There was a lack of clarity around what it meant to be culturally competent, and how to put that competence into practice. That's when I realized that we needed to take a step back, to define what cultural competence meant in the context of this particular organization. We assembled a cross-functional team, comprised of employees from different departments and levels of seniority. Together, we brainstormed a list of key attributes: empathy, self-awareness, adaptability, and communication, that we believed were essential for achieving cultural competence. Next, we developed a set of metrics that would help us measure progress against these attributes. We created surveys to gauge employee attitudes and perceptions, tracked diversity and inclusion metrics, and established a rating system to evaluate the cultural competence of individual employees. But here's the thing: metrics alone weren't enough. We needed to create a culture of accountability, where employees felt empowered to take ownership of their own cultural competence. That's when we introduced a series of workshops and training sessions, designed to educate employees on the importance of cultural competence, and to provide them with the tools and resources they needed to develop their skills. Throughout the process, I was struck by the complexity of the challenge. It wasn't just about developing a set of metrics or creating a training program. It was about fundamentally changing the way the organization operated, about creating a culture that valued diversity and inclusion. I remember feeling a sense of frustration, at times, as we navigated the inevitable roadblocks and setbacks. But I also remember feeling a sense of excitement, as we began to see progress, as employees started to take ownership of their own cultural competence. In the end, our efforts paid off. The company saw a significant increase in employee engagement, a reduction in turnover rates, and an improvement in customer satisfaction. But, more importantly, they developed a culture of operational excellence, one that valued diversity and inclusion, and that empowered employees to take ownership of their own cultural competence. It's a lesson that I've carried with me, one that I've applied to countless other organizations. Cultural competence isn't a destination, it's a journey. It requires a deep understanding of the complexities of human behavior, and a willingness to adapt and evolve. But the payoff is worth it. A culture of operational excellence, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. The Cultural Competence team will utilize a multifaceted approach to measure the success of its cultural competence initiative within the organization. This will involve tracking and analyzing a range of key performance indicators, KPIs, that are specifically designed to assess the impact and effectiveness of the initiative. Firstly, the team will track employee engagement and participation in cultural competence training programs. This will be measured through surveys and feedback forms that assess employee satisfaction, knowledge, and confidence in working with diverse patient populations. The KPIs will include percentage of employees participating in cultural competence training programs, employee self-assessment of cultural competence knowledge and skills, employee satisfaction with cultural competence training programs, employee confidence in working with diverse patient populations. Secondly, the team will monitor patient satisfaction and experience with care. This will be achieved through patient surveys and feedback forms that assess patient perceptions of culturally sensitive care. The KPIs will include patient satisfaction with care received, patient perception of cultural sensitivity of care providers, patient willingness to recommend the organization to others, patient Net Promoter Score, NPS. Thirdly, the team will track health outcomes and disparities among diverse patient populations. This will be measured through analysis of electronic health records, claims data, and other relevant sources. The KPIs will include health outcomes for diverse patient populations, e.g. blood pressure control, diabetes management, etc. Disparities in health outcomes among diverse patient populations, patient readmission rates, patient mortality rates. Fourthly, the team will assess the cultural competence of care providers. This will be achieved through assessments of provider knowledge, attitudes, and skills in culturally sensitive care. The KPIs will include provider knowledge of cultural competence principles and practices, provider attitudes towards culturally sensitive care, provider skills in culturally sensitive communication and care, provider self-assessment of cultural competence. Fifthly, the team will monitor the cultural competence of the organization's policies and practices. This will be achieved through reviews of organizational policies, procedures, and practices. The KPIs will include inclusion of cultural competence principles in organizational policies and procedures, availability of culturally sensitive resources and services, inclusivity of diverse patient populations in organizational decision-making processes, cultural competence training for leaders and managers. Lastly, the team will track the return on investment, ROI, of the Cultural Competence Initiative. This will be achieved through analysis of cost savings, revenue growth, and other relevant financial metrics. The KPIs will include cost savings from reduced readmissions and complications, revenue growth from increased patient satisfaction and loyalty, return on investment, ROI, of cultural competence training programs, cost-benefit analysis of culturally sensitive care initiatives. By tracking and analyzing these KPIs, the Cultural Competence team will be able to assess the success of its initiative and identify areas for improvement. The team will use this data to refine its strategies, inform its decisions, and drive organizational change towards cultural excellence.